Chapter 1. Elias Thorne, Junior Archivist, felt the chill before he even saw the nameplate. The Volkov Collection was whispered about in hushed tones, a myth among the museum's staff, a repository of the truly unwanted. His new assignment, delivered with detached formality by a senior curator who carefully avoided eye contact, felt less like a promotion and more like a banishment. He clutched the heavy iron key, its teeth corroded with age, as he navigated the increasingly dimly lit corridors of the National Antiquities Museum. Each step echoed unnervingly in the silence, the air growing colder, heavier, smelling of dust, decay, and something else, something metallic and faintly acrid. The wing itself was a relic, a forgotten appendage appended to the museum's grand facade. Paint peeled from the high ceilings like diseased skin, revealing scarred plaster beneath. Cobwebs, thick and gray, draped everything, swaying almost imperceptibly as Elias pushed open the massive oak door. A gust of air, stale and laden with the scent of aged paper and something unspeakably ancient, assaulted him. The room beyond was vast, a cavern of forgotten knowledge. Shelves, stretching to the vaulted ceiling, groaned under the weight of countless tomes, scrolls, and enigmatic artifacts, all shrouded under thick layers of dust and grime. This was the Volkov Collection, and its sheer volume was instantly overwhelming. He began his work, meticulously, obsessively, as was his nature. Days blurred into a monotonous cycle of cataloging, of gingerly handling objects that seemed to hum with a quiet, unsettling energy. There were figurines carved from unknown bone, texts bound in cured human skin, and bizarre implements whose purpose Elias dared not contemplate. The grotesque nature of the collection seeped into his subconscious, infiltrating his dreams with unsettling imagery. The isolation became absolute. No other staff ventured into this wing, leaving Elias utterly alone with the decaying relics and the ever-present silence. But the silence wasn't always complete. Sometimes, when the museum was empty and the gaslights flickered low, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper would brush against his ear, just beyond the reach of comprehension. Shadows, too, seemed to possess a life of their own, coiling and uncoiling in the periphery of his vision, coalescing for a fleeting second into shapes that dissolved before he could properly focus. He dismissed them as tricks of the light, fatigue, the oppressive atmosphere playing havoc with his senses. Yet a disquieting certainty began to root itself in his mind. He was not alone. Something ancient, something malevolent was stirring. Chapter 2. Despite the creeping dread, a strange, almost magnetic pull drew Elias deeper into the heart of the Volkov collection. His fingers twitched with an inexplicable need to open the next scroll, to decipher the next glyph, as if the artifacts themselves whispered commands directly into his subconscious. He found entire sections dedicated to grotesque figurines, their features contorted in silent agony, carved from what felt disturbingly like petrified organ tissue. Their obsidian eyes seemed to track him as he passed, 1,000 tiny, unblinking gazes. Parchment scrolls, brittle and yellowed, bore intricate designs, not of human script, but of something sinuous and predatory, accompanied by crude sketches of cloaked figures sacrificing to an amorphous void. The texts, translated in fragments and riddled with archaic symbolism, hinted at a forgotten principality, a land consumed by a hungry shadow where knowledge was both power and poison. Each discovery tightened the invisible binds that held him, a morbid curiosity overriding his instinct for self-preservation. The unsettling phenomena escalated. The whispers were no longer fleeting. They coalesced into a guttural hum, a murmur just beneath the threshold of understanding but undeniably present, reverberating in the bones of the building. Chilling drafts snaked through the stagnant air, raising gooseflesh on his arms, even when no window was open, no door ajar. He felt eyes upon him, not just a distant presence but a scrutinizing gaze that seemed to follow his every movement, a cold weight on his back as he bent over a text. A book, high on a distant shelf, once toppled with a soft thud, sending a cloud of ancient dust billowing into the air, yet no one was near. Sleep offered no refuge, his nights plagued by vivid nightmares of ink flowing like blood, pages tearing themselves into ravenous mouths. He found himself murmuring apologies to the shadows, justifications for his continued work, arguments with an unseen presence. A frantic, almost manic energy fueled his days. He knew, intellectually, that he should stop, should flee this place, but a more primal, insidious urge held him captive. Each artifact he catalogued, each dusty volume he touched, seemed to bind him tighter, weaving invisible threads of dependency. The dread was a constant companion, a cold knot in his stomach, yet the compulsion to continue to *no grew stronger still. He was a moth to a flame, knowing the heat would consume him, yet utterly unable to turn away. Chapter 3. The fragile barrier of Elias' sanity crumbled under the relentless pressure. Days bled into nights, marked only by the deepening shadows and the growing weight of dread in his chest. He moved through the archives like a sleepwalker, his cataloging a desperate, compulsive ritual. The whispers now formed a cacophony, 1,000 hushed voices echoing the archaic texts he meticulously processed, each syllable carving a deeper groove into his mind. The cold presence at his back had solidified into an oppressive pressure, a suffocating shroud. It happened as he reached for a leather-bound tome, its cover unadorned save for a single, stylized bone clasp. The air grew impossibly heavy, thick with the scent of aged paper and something else, something metallic and acrid like old blood. From the shadowed shelves surrounding him, the very collection seemed to stir. Pages fluttered in unseen currents, then coalesced, not falling but rising. A shifting mass began to form before him, born from the decaying volumes and brittle scrolls. It was an impossible, grotesque thing, a churning, undulating construct of countless fluttering pages, black script writhing across their surfaces like trapped insects. Tendrils of hardened parchment, sharp as razor blades, shot out, interwoven with fragments of polished bone and solidified ink that pulsed with a faint, internal light. It had no discernible head or limbs, yet it moved with a chilling intelligence, radiating an ancient, ravenous hunger. The creature lunged, a silent, sickening rush of paper and bone. Elias gasped, stumbling back, but the parchment tendrils were impossibly fast, wrapping around his wrists and ankles with surprising strength. They tightened, biting into his skin, the sharp edges threatening to flay him. He cried out, struggling against the unnatural binds, his heart hammering against his ribs. Then came the true horror. As the creature drew him closer, its amorphous form pressed against his face, flooding his mind not with terror alone, but with a torrent of raw, unadulterated information. 1,000,000 fragmented images flashed through his consciousness. Forgotten rituals, blasphemous incantations, the faces of countless individuals documenting their own demise, their meticulous records becoming food for this entity. He saw himself, a microscopic cog in an ancient parasitic mechanism, his efforts to catalog merely feeding its insatiable maw. The creature was not merely present in the archives. It was the archives, a sentient hunger that thrived on the act of documentation itself, growing stronger, more defined, with every item Elias had so painstakingly processed. The realization struck him with the force of a physical blow. He had not just been cataloging a collection, he had been nurturing a monster. Chapter 4. The tendrils recoiled with a wet, papery slap, freeing Elias to collapse onto the dusty floor, gasping for air that felt thick with the essence of decay. The creature, a roiling storm of script and shards, hovered menacingly for a moment, its amorphous form pulsating with the knowledge it had just imprinted upon him. Amidst the chaos of fragmented memories and blasphemous truths, one name had pierced through the torrent with terrifying clarity, echoing from a text he dismissed as lunacy mere days ago. The Scrivener's shade asterisk. He was face to face with a legend, a parasitic entity that wasn't just asterisk in the collection, but was the collection's malevolent soul. His survival instinct screamed, overriding the lingering psychic trauma. He scrambled to his feet, eyes darting, searching for an exit. The door he'd entered through, Moments ago ajar, now stood sealed, its ancient wood seamlessly merged with the surrounding wall, devoid of hinges or handle. Panic seized him as he ran, desperate, down what he thought was a familiar corridor. But the shelves themselves seemed to conspire against him, shifting subtly, rearranging into unfamiliar angles. Walls pressed in, creating narrower passages that twisted into sudden cul-de-sacs. The very architecture of the wing had become fluid, a shifting maze designed to disorient and trap. The shade pursued him, not with a roar, but with a chilling, rustling omnipresence. It manifested in his periphery, a flicker of frantic pages turning, the cold breath of its presence stirring the air behind him. Whispers slithered into his mind, insidious suggestions of futility, of the sweetness of surrender, of the inevitability of becoming another meticulous record for its endless hunger. It wasn't merely attempting to physically impede him. It was systematically dismantling his sanity, stripping away his will, trying to convince him that his mind, too, was merely another document awaiting categorization. Every shadow seemed to coalesce into its form. Every creak of the ancient building became its malicious intent. He crashed against a dead end of towering, unstable volumes, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. Escape was an illusion. This labyrinth wasn't just a physical trap, it was a psychological prison. He couldn't flee from something that was the very fabric of his surroundings. If he was to survive, if he was to reclaim his sanity, he had to confront it. He had to fight back, not by running, but by finding a way to sever its parasitic hold, to recontain it within the very pages that composed its terrifying being. With renewed, albeit desperate resolve, Elias turned from the illusion of an exit, his gaze now fixed on the labyrinthine shelves, hunting not for freedom, but for a forgotten countermeasure, a ritual to bind the Scrivener's shade once more. Chapter 5. A frenzied, desperate resolve coursed through Elias. He wasn't merely searching, he was hunting, his eyes now sharpened by terror and a burgeoning, terrible knowledge. His gaze fell upon a slender, unmarked codex, tucked almost invisibly between two monumental historical texts. It resonated with a faint, cold hum that spoke not of paper and ink, but of an active, hungry presence. Within its brittle pages, scrawled in an ancient, looping script, he found the countermeasure, a ritual not of destruction but of profound disruption. The creature fed on order, on the meticulous documentation that gave it form. To unravel it, he had to unravel its most cherished narratives. He identified 3 artifacts the shade seemed particularly fixated upon, their dark energies thrumming even through the suffocating gloom. A journal bound in an unsettlingly pliable hide, a grotesque, intricately detailed map of the forgotten principality, and a scroll detailing the twisted lineage of its rulers. These were not mere objects. They were stories, anchors of the shade's being. The ritual demanded their deliberate defilement, a shattering of their historical integrity. With a shard of petrified wood he'd clutched from a fallen shelf, Elias began. He scrawled chaotic, meaningless symbols over the journal's fastidious script, obscuring the precise entries. The archives convulsed around him, shelves groaning, the air growing heavy and suffocating. Whispers intensified, coalescing into a guttural snarl as the shifting mass of the Scrivener's shade manifested, lashing out with tendrils of brittle parchment. It screamed into his mind, a raw, unbearable agony of violated order, of narrative undone. Elias, though his body trembled, tore the grotesque map, the meticulously inked lines of forgotten borders ripping with a sound like tearing flesh. Then the scroll. He didn't burn it. Instead, he plunged it into a forgotten basin of stagnant black water, watching the ancient ink bleed and blur, dissolving the intricate family tree into an illegible, meaningless smear. Each act was a dagger, each disruption a shattering blow to the creature's parasitic existence. The final shriek that erupted was not of fury, but of pure, existential despair, an echoing cacophony of shredded paper and dissolving ink. The oppressive weight lifted, the very air lightening as the Scrivener's shade recoiled, dissolving back into the vast, inert collection. The shifting walls of the labyrinth solidified, the corridors stretching back into familiar, albeit still dusty, pathways. Elias stumbled out of the wing, profoundly changed. The world outside the museum seemed impossibly bright, painfully mundane. He left without a word, never looking back, the indelible scars of shredded knowledge and an ancient terror forever imprinted on his soul.